Once again, thank you everybody for joining us. The Colorado Cancer Coalition's mission is to reduce the impact of breast cancer for Coloradans through risk reduction, early detection, access to personalized cancer care, and comprehensive survivorship support, regardless of social determinants of health, geography, or personal/community identity. The Breast Cancer Task Force is a statewide group of professionals, organizations, and community members working together to support breast cancer related efforts across Colorado. The task force provides a space to share resources, collaborate on projects, and highlight current work in the field. BCTF helps connect individuals and organizations involved in breast cancer prevention, care, and survivorship. With members representing a wide range of expertise and backgrounds, the group collaborates to create shared impact. And also, real quick, my name is Tiffany. I am one of the co-chairs of the Breast Cancer Task Force. And we have Emma Gomes here. And if you want to move to the next slide, I'm going to introduce her real quickly. She is an exercise oncology specialist and founder of Project RX, a functional fitness program designed to support cancer patients and survivors through evidence-based movement. She holds a doctorate in human bioenergetics with a specialization in exercise oncology from Colorado State University, where her research focused on the impact of acute bouts of exercise on cancer-related fatigue. Her work centers on making exercise a practical and accessible part of cancer care. So with that, Emma, go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, Tiffany, and thank you so much for everyone for being here today to listen to this webinar. I'm super excited to be here and kind of share some information. Like Tiffany said, my name is Emma Gomes. So my PhD is in exercise oncology. So I kind of focus and my passion is how to really utilize exercise as a way to mitigate side effects and different treatment-related symptoms pre, during, and after cancer treatment. So that's kind of what our talk is going to be. It's going to be called the Exercise Toolkit. So how do we really have personalized exercise for every stage of survivorship? So sometimes when we think about a toolkit, it's about kind of adding different things to our bucket to use at different times. So we're really going to talk about that in the way of exercise and cancer. So how do we utilize different exercise at different times for each survivor to meet our individual needs? So we're going to be breaking that down today. The first, cancer survivorship and kind of a snapshot. So as a lot of us know, being from Colorado, we have an impact of cancer on our state. Luckily, advances in cancer screening and treatments have led to sooner diagnosis and individuals living longer, which have led to about 32 million survivors worldwide. And this number is expected to grow with 2/3 living 5 years post-diagnosis. So we're having earlier screening mechanisms, which is catching cancer earlier, even at younger ages, which is also in turn having that longer post-diagnosis or living beyond cancer. And with that, so living post-cancer also, so despite improvements in treatments, also has persistent side effects. So they remain very common. So things we'll talk about today is cancer fatigue, pain, decreases in quality of life, things like that that we are living longer with in cancer survivorship in Colorado. And with that post 5 years and persistent side effects, currently only about 14% of cancer survivors are meeting guidelines of exercise. So really being active during and post-treatment. And we're going to break that down a little bit more today, but and really how to utilize exercise is this mechanic to help kind of mitigate these side effects. So let's jump in to what even are the general exercise guidelines for cancer survivors and patients. So a lot of clinical trials and randomized control trials have been done to look at the effect of exercise on different health-related outcomes and just survivorship in general. So we've kind of updated and really grown in our research area of exercise oncology in the last 10 or so years. And we have a lot of data now that supports that exercise is extremely beneficial for cancer patients and survivors, no matter where they are on the continuum. So just breaking down the general guidelines. The first and most important part of those guidelines is to try to avoid inactivity. So really that just means reducing our overall sedentary time. So whether that's sitting less or anything like that is kind of breaking up that sitting time during the day into movement breaks, which we'll talk about. So the number one key to remember is we're just going to try to avoid inactivity at all costs during survivorship. The next is our more aerobic exercise. So when we think of aerobic exercise, we think of any exercise that uses large muscle groups, such as running, walking, hiking, swimming, biking, things like that. Any exercise that gets our heart rate up, maybe we're breathing a little bit harder. So the general guideline recommends about 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity exercise or 75 minutes a week of vigorous exercise. And again, we'll break that down a little bit more, but that's the overall general guideline to get the most out of our exercise. And finally, resistance training. So the goal is resistance training is we think about more of that lifting weights or things like that that have that external load on our muscles and bones. So again, weight machines, bands, rowing, anything where we're using that body weight as external force. And the overall guidelines for that recommend at least 2 times a week of resistance training. And oftentimes with a day in between to recover, but that 2 times a week is our overall goal. So now let's talk about some cancer-related side effects. So again, I'm sure a lot of you on this call are very familiar with side effects, but I would like to talk about kind of how exercise really hits to mitigate both physical and mental side effects of cancer treatment. So one of the biggest ones we all talk about and was kind of my focus during my PhD was cancer-related fatigue. So over 90% of cancer patients and survivors report fatigue at some point. When we think about that physical, cognitive, mental, emotional tiredness that just is not alleviated by sleep. One of the number one ways to help reduce this cancer fatigue currently is actually exercise and movement, which seems kind of like when I tell people this and we kind of advocate for this, they say it seems like a weird paradox, right? I'm already tired. I'm telling you I'm tired, but you're telling me I should actually exert more energy to then decrease my fatigue. So I know you're probably thinking that's kind of crazy when I say that, but we have a ton of data that actually shows even small movements, 10 to 15 minutes, can help decrease that fatigue following exercise. We get these kind of mood boosters or kind of this energy after that can help relate fatigue. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the presentation as well. The second one, or that mental or emotional side effect, is a big one, is anxiety and depression. So exercise or movement can help reduce stress and feel more in control during uncertain times. So a lot of times survivors, as you all know, have this kind of uncertainty. They just don't know what's going to happen next, and they're looking for things that how to control during a diagnosis. Well, exercise is a really powerful tool to help, again, that brain activate, reducing that anxiety and depression, helps have connectiveness, and definitely if we're in a group setting or even alone in that kind of setting. And the third one that is super prevalent is physical function. So kind of movement makes everyday activities feel easier. So physical function is a huge one when we're talking about activity living, independent living, and the ability to carry on our normal day activities during treatment or post. So when we're looking at very specific health-related outcomes, we actually, in addition to the exercise guidelines I presented a couple slides ago, we also have exercise guidelines specifically related to certain health-related outcomes in those with cancer. So I know it's a little bit of a busy chart. I'm going to go ahead and draw your attention to a few specifically. First in this red box is cancer-related fatigue, which we just talked about. So research has found that the highest evidence, or we have strong evidence, that exercise when we do aerobic 3 times a week for 30 minutes, in resistance 2 times a week for about 2 sets, we have the best outcome for reducing that cancer-related fatigue. So this is the clinically shown kind of prescription of exercise that can help with that fatigue. Now looking at those anxiety and depression markers that we looked like last slide, very similar. So about 3 times a week of exercise for 30 to 60 minutes, so a little bit longer. And we don't have a ton of evidence currently on resistance training in these two, but they also are beneficial no matter if we do it or not. So these are very specific guidelines to help kind of maximize our health-related outcomes with anxiety and depression, is really getting moving those 3 times a week. And finally, a big one, we only have moderate evidence, but still evidence on bone health. So I know a lot specifically in breast cancer is a lot of big thing is looking at the bone density or bone health during or after treatment. And we have a lot of moderate evidence to suggest that resistance training is extremely beneficial to combat that loss of bone density during and post-treatment. So this recommends about 2 to 3 weeks of moderate to vigorous resistance training. So we really have to exert external loads on our bones to either maintain our current bone density or gain bone density into survivorship. So we'll talk in next slide about those specific activities, but if you can take away one thing, is that if we get moving with a combination of aerobic and resistance exercises, we can maximize our health-related outcomes in those with cancer. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and talk about activities of daily living. So these are activities that are foundational skills needed to manage one's basic needs and required for independent living. So if you are all a provider or a cancer survivor yourself, I want you to think about maybe you've been told to exercise, but you don't know where to start. What I'm going to show you on this slide is my main kind of suggestion to kind of where to focus our energy on certain exercises to get the maximum benefit. So a couple activity day living here shown on the screen. So kind of 4 different pictures. We have using the restroom or getting out of bed. It's kind of having enough strength in our legs to be able to stand up on our own and unassisted. The second picture is we all do it in our daily lives. We pick things up off the ground, whether it's you drop a pencil or you have to pick up a box or anything like that. We all should learn how to properly and safely lift things up off the ground. The third one is falling. With cancer survivorship, it can increase fall risks or that lower bone density with fall risk. And just in everyday life, we have different fall risks. And the fourth one there is carrying our groceries, whether you're grocery shopping or you're shopping or just carrying loads in either side of your body. So to maximize these benefits, we're going to go through one by one. So like I said, for using the restroom or out of bed, we have to technically a squat, right? Every time we get up out of our chairs, I'm sure we all did it at least a few times today, is activating that squat, especially if we're carrying something with load. So one of the best movements we can have compound is our squat, even if it's sit-to-stand or chair squats, whether it be air squats or any kind of weighted squat, which is big for bone density. It's just getting movement and activating our hips and our quads and being able to have the strength to stand up on our own. The second movement is a deadlift. So it doesn't have to be a barbell deadlift, it can be a kettlebell, dumbbell, even any water jugs or anything you have laying around your house. But learning how to properly pick something off the ground with proper form, with a little bit of load, saves our lower backs, but also, again, really builds our posterior chain. So think of calves, hamstrings, glutes, any of that are essential muscle groups to work on our daily activities. 3, so if we fall, we have to be able to get back up, especially in survivorship and during treatment, if this is a larger risk, is we have to be able to comfortably feel like we can get up off of ourselves. So this is an example of a burpee. So again, falling to the ground and getting back up, whether that be chair assisted, on the ground, at a stepping back or a jumping pace. This is a really important movement that can be modified to fit anyone's needs of where they're at, but it's crucial muscle group and training to do. And the fourth movement, so to carry those grocery bags, we also have to do what's called a farmer's carry. So holding weight equally on either sides of our body. You can do kettlebells or dumbbells, or again, like water jugs, soup cans, something like that, where we're forcing our body to activate our core to hold objects on either side. And it works on grip strength. So grip strength is a huge proportion of something we test a lot in clinical care, and an outcome for just survival and a sense of grip strength. So this farmer's carry is a great option to kind of start working on that. Again, that strengthens core, back, and arms carrying that weight. Okay, so we went over so far, we went over some guidelines that research suggests, we went over some different health-related outcomes, some activity daily living. But a lot of times when I speak to patients or survivors, I hear, I was told to exercise by my oncologist or PCP, but I don't know, what is safe for me, how to fit it into my schedule. I have different barriers of what keeps me from exercise. So how do I actually even start? So a lot of people they're told to exercise, they just don't know what that means or where to start. So a big thing we like to focus on is implementation. So how do we make exercise realistic for cancer patients and survivors in everyone's busy life? So as I said, cancer survivors and patients, usually their day changes. So their life is constantly changing, maybe based off appointments, their energy or fatigue levels, different side effects, different things they have going on with their families or social activities. And so sometimes exercise can't look the same every day to be able to be successful. So sometimes the challenge isn't knowing what to do, it's how to figure out how to actually do it in a way that works for each individual. And again, person A and person B could have similar diagnosis and outcome, but their everyday lives could look differently. So their exercise plan, therefore, also has to look differently for them to be successful in movement. So the overall goal at if we are a cancer patient survivor or we're helping provide for a cancer patient survivor, is focusing on building an exercise routine that is flexible. So that's our main goal here is flexible, something that can be adjusted on the hard days and still keep moving forward. In the cancer continuum, people may have days where they're going up or down or kind of back and forth, and we have to find an exercise routine that can be flexible and modified for each day that we're feeling. So we're going to jump into a couple ways of how we do this. So a big thing that I like to use is self-monitoring. So learning how to check in with yourself during exercise. This is a big thing to be able to have education for yourself on how you're feeling, but also if you're working with someone, kind of feedback on how to adapt your exercise. So we're going to go kind of through 3 different models or ways that we can use self-monitoring during exercise. So the first is exercise intensity. So I'll talk about the talk test and rate of perceived exertion for that. So exercise intensity is how hard you're working during exercise. So you may have heard me say moderate or vigorous or light activity. That's how we kind of put a prescription on exercise is that intensity. Our second model we're going to talk about is side effects. So how do I really ask myself, how am I feeling today? And how do I take that response and modify my exercise for that day? And third is kind of a tool that we use for that self-monitoring. It's called a traffic light system, and we're going to talk about that or a level system on how to adapt exercise. So kind of hop into our first thing. This is called RPE or rate of perceived exertion chart. So it's from 1 to 10. It is a way to have individuals self-select exercise intensity from a subjective standpoint. So heart rate and anything maybe people wear watches is a great option. But as we all know, heart rate and even blood pressure can be kind of altered based off what treatments and medications we're all taking. So sometimes that may not be an accurate gauge of how hard we're working during exercise. So that's why I'm going to show you 2 ways that individuals can subjectively monitor exercise without any kind of technology or equipment. So this chart, as I said, goes from 1 to 10. So a 1 on this chart is rated very light activity. So maybe all of us here sitting watching this webinar would rate their current activity as 1, right? You're sitting down, you're not breathing very hard. I might be because I'm talking, but you all in general hopefully aren't. So it's very light activity. Versus if you rate an activity 10, it means probably the max effort you ever ran, maybe a all-out 100-yard sprint or a max lift or something like that. Our goal mainly for exercise every day is to kind of fit in that middle. So kind of like 4 to 8. We want some moderate, doable workouts. We also want to work on that higher intensity. But this is a chart that we can all use to kind of monitor. So for example, say I do a 30-minute yoga class. So after the class, I can kind of reflect of like, okay, based off this chart, how would that rate that intensity for myself? Did it feel a lot harder today? Did I rate it as a 7 versus yesterday I took the same class and rated it as a 3? And that's completely okay, but it allows you to kind of gauge where that intensity time point was for you that day. So that is our first chart. Our second one is called the exercise intensity talk test. So very similar to our RPE scale, we have in the green on the top is not difficult exercise, all the way to the red scale of vigorous exercise. And this one is based off how easily or difficult it is for you to talk when you're participating in the exercise. So for example, say you're on a walk with a friend, met up with a neighbor and you're going for a walk around the neighborhood. A way to gauge how hard you're working during that walk can be how easy maybe you're able to carry on a conversation. So light exercise, you should be able to talk or sing without straining for breath and kind of have full-on sentence conversations. Versus if you were in vigorous activity, maybe you're not really having full on conversations anymore, right? You're kind of breathing heavier. Maybe you're getting a word or two out to your neighbor at that point, if you say you're jogging next to each other. But it's a way to gauge how you're feeling that day and use it during exercise. Some people say if they like sang, would they be able to sing a song right now if they're walking on a treadmill or something like that? But again, just another tool to add to our toolbox of how we can self-select our exercise intensity that day. Okay, now we're going to talk more about this check-in with ourselves or kind of self-monitoring education. So at Project RX, we use this sheet pre and post a single exercise session, and it allows me as the trainer to gauge where my participants are that day, but also the cancer patient survivor to help educate themselves. So as you can see on this little printout, I have individuals rate their fatigue, how they physically feel, emotionally feel, and how they slept the night prior from 0 to 10. So again, no right or wrong answers on this. It's how they perceive their fatigue and how they're feeling at the current moment. Fatigue A is a big one. I know it's a big side effect we talked about. So if you came with really high fatigue, we're always curious, did your fatigue decrease after our exercise session? The other big thing here is sleep. So I think sometimes we forget how big sleep can impact the rest of our daily activities the following day. So sometimes this question is a great one to kind of ask people if they're trying to decide what exercise to do is based on how they slept. So maybe they slept really terrible last night and they're like, okay, I need to adjust my workout based off of last night's sleep because it's very applicable to exercise when you start moving. But again, I just use this to gauge so they can kind of have to self-select on this chart. And then also for me as the trainer, or a great option if you're a provider or trying to assist someone who is starting exercise, a great way to just gauge where they're at the current moment. And then I'll also use these questions at the very end so they can reflect on it. Like, okay, I came in with fatigue, I was pretty tired, but I actually left feeling my mood was increased. I feel better overall. And it's also empowering for the cancer patient or survivor to feel that kind of change and they can see it in themselves like, okay, yeah, actually, I was able to move for 15 or 20 minutes today and I actually got benefit out of that time. So it kind of helps that exercise motivation piece as well because it's direct feedback of how they're feeling that day. And finally, looking at this is what I called our traffic light system or energy level system. This is a great, it's used in clinical practice and different behavior change models, but this is a great tool, A, if someone is currently actively going through treatment to decide what exercise to do. So to explain it, and then I'll show you how you would use it. For our traffic light system, just as you would think, we have our green, yellow, and red lights. And again, our 0 to a 10 scale. So it's another way to rate ourselves on this energy or traffic light system. So if I rate myself in the green that day, I probably feel pretty good and not having any major symptoms or side effects. Maybe my blood levels are good this week. Versus if I'm in the orange or yellow, maybe I have mild symptoms. I feel nauseous or pain or have that in the moment. So what I would have, how I would use this is I would have an individual come to my session. I'd say, okay, in this exact moment for today, can you rate yourself on how you're feeling? Can you give me a color on the traffic light system? They can take a second and self-reflect of, okay, I recognize maybe they self-select red. I recognize that I don't feel great today. I have had some really bad fatigue this morning. I'm feeling kind of nauseous. I'm just kind of feeling drained. Then I can say, okay, you showed up today. You're recognizing that you are in red, but how can we still get some movement in that's appropriate for that red level without and still get some benefit from exercise, but maybe not pushing ourselves as if tomorrow we had a green on this scale. So what I mean by that is kind of matching exercises that go along with this traffic light system. So for example, say that individual came in, they rated a red. So for today, maybe our movement consists of more sit to stands, counter push-ups, maybe not a heavy weight, or maybe we're just hopping on a stationary bike. But then 2 days later, they come in and they rate a green, they're feeling a lot more energy. Awesome. Maybe now today we're adding some weight to our squats. We're moving up to a jog or a hike or maybe a faster paced walk. So we're just utilizing this system to help adapt exercises from a day-to-day variation, right? Everyone kind of feels differently. But overall, the goal is we still want to move. We still want to get these exercise benefits. It just may look different every day for each of us. Okay? So that is kind of a great model I like to use, especially if we're in active treatment to kind of gauge how we're doing that day. So to go along with that, the next few slides will see some live videos of some exercises to also show some different levels where people can start. So if we're looking for some ideas to give people of, okay, maybe I don't have a current exercise history, I haven't been an exerciser, but I really want to start, I just don't know what, but I really need to start slow and progress, right? That's our goal. So the first level or level 1 could be some chair-based movements that we'll see in this video that are completely seated, so no one is standing. This could also be good if you have a patient or survivor that has any kind of balance concerns or can't be weight bearing at that time. Maybe they're on oxygen or different things. We can still get some movement in, but we're just in a more controlled chair-based setting. Let's see if my videos will play here. Good. It's decided not to move again for me. Okay, maybe this will work. Awesome. So as you can see, this first movement in our level 1 video are called leg extensions. So essentially you're just having Someone kick out their leg and activate or squeeze that quad. The second one are some calf raises. So we can do calf raises sitting. It's a little bit more of that controlled environment. They're really just activating that calf. Really important for any lymphedema that we have in that lower limb to kind of pump that back up. This next one is some sit to stand. So we're working on some of those squats, but we're utilizing that chair for support. The next one here are just some arm circles. So if we don't have any upper body range of motion restrictions, which would be a different story, this is a great way to utilize some just body weight resistance and working on those arm circles. This next one is called a goalpost press. So activating kind of those shoulder blades and working on getting full range of motion overhead. We can do all of this from a seated position, as you can see. So this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a few ideas to kind of kickstart someone in more of a chair-based position. Okay, level 2, which is super important to move on to before we add any intensity, is really working on a balance and core. So whether this be core, pelvic floor, any of this is super important, especially if an individual has undergone surgery at any point to their abdominal area. Usually that balance or core is affected afterwards. So really strengthening those kind of key areas are very important to kind of master first before we move on to any, again, higher intensity or higher impact movements as we progress. Let's see if our video will play here. Perfect. So these first ones are called side steps. So we're in a little bit of a quarter squat. We're activating the knees, the hips. You can always add a band around our lower body to add a little resistance. The second one is some glute bridges. So again, activating core, glutes, and really important for that lower back. So low impact and high benefit of that lower back and posterior chain. And we can always add marches. So this adds a little bit of that hip flexor stretch. Again, taxing that core in a laying down position. So we're not really high movement. And then our last one here is some bird dog. So this is great for coordination and balance. And 3 is that core activation and kind of working on that muscle group or that muscle memory of activating both our right and left sides at different times. So that level, again, level 1 was our chair-based exercises. Level 2 would be really focusing on our core and balance and really coordination. And then our level 3 would be standing exercises at a lower intensity. So I'm going to show lower intensity movements in this video. In the next slide, I'm going to show the same movements, but upgraded to a higher intensity. So same circuit, but just different intensity levels based on where we are. Oops. See if it'll play here. Go. Okay, so this first movement is called step jacks. So we're just stepping out to the side, raising our arms overhead. If we have any restriction overhead, we can always keep our arms under kind of our head and just go across our body. This second one is called a step and punch. So we're working on that lateral movement outside and punching forward. This third movement is a bicep curl. So just adding, again, weight based off where we are individually. But just adding some bicep curls in here. These are great for lifting anything up. And then this fourth movement is arm raises. So working on front and lateral position. When anyone is doing any of these exercises, a couple things to always cue is A is activating the core. So keeping that core tight when we're raising anything, especially weight. And 2, sometimes we all forget to breathe. So especially important for cancer patients and survivors to really make sure you're breathing, because sometimes it's very easy to hold our breath. We want to make sure we don't cause any lightheadedness or anything like that as we're activating that core and lifting. Okay, our third one here is our high intensity or that level 3. So we're going to see all the same 4 movements we just did, but at a little bit of a higher intensity, so a level up. See if it plays. So instead of step jacks, we now are doing jumping jacks. Instead of that step and punch, we're now hopping out to the side and adding in a punch. And our third one would be a bicep curl, so like we did in our lower intensity, but now we're adding a press overhead. So we're just adding a little bit more of that compound motion of that press overhead with our dumbbells there. And finally, our exercise 4 is instead of our raising our arms out to the front and lateral, we're adding a band or dumbbells in to do an upright row. So we're activating again that back and those shoulder muscles to add in an upright row. Awesome. So again, those are just all examples, not an exhaustive list, just some things to get people started and just to kind of reframe our mind of we can do different things each day as long as we're getting some movement in, and they can look different based off intensity level or maybe mobility wise or balance wise. We can still get similar movements in just at different time points, and can keep progressing people. So maybe someone has done the chair-based exercises for a while and we're looking for what's that next step, just some more options for individuals. So again, just all things to add to our toolkit as maybe a cancer survivor ourselves or patient or any provider that would help any of these individuals get started. And finally, we have our contact slide here. I'll leave it up for a second with any of our information. Again, if we have any questions or anything post this webinar, I would love to hear any of them. My email is right here on this list, so please feel free to contact me at any point.
Thank you, Emma. We do have some time for questions. I also wanted to plug our feedback form. So any topics that you want to hear from the Breast Cancer Task Force at any time, or feedback for the task force itself, or Emma, I think Emily is dropping that into the chat. Thank you, Emily. And with that, I have a couple of questions, but I'll let other people speak first. Nobody has questions? I'll start us off then. You shared the first slide of guidelines, and I may have missed this real fast, but which guidelines were they?
Yes, the American College of Sports Medicine put out that is the name of the original guidelines and where our evidence is from. Yeah.
And I also may have missed this part as well, but is there a difference between a person who doesn't have cancer and our cancer patients? And I don't know if you highlighted that or not.
Yes, that is a super good question. So we currently, if you look at our kind of just national guidelines for individuals, they are actually the same. So we have a lot of evidence that shows exercise is beneficial, but currently we don't have specific compared to healthy individuals versus cancer patients or survivors. The goal for both would just to move more. And that's why that second chart I showed with more specific to health-related outcomes, we have more research on specific health-related outcomes like fatigue and whatnot for different dosing, rather than just the general guidelines. But I would caution people, even though those are kind of our research clinical guidelines, I would say A is just get moving as much as you can. If you're not hitting those guidelines, I wouldn't extremely stress on hitting those guidelines each time. Goal is just to move and to pick a movement style that is enjoyable for you. So we say a lot in kind of clinical practice and research is the best movement you can do is one that you enjoy. So I use the example of if someone told you you need to run marathons to be healthy and you're like, you hate running, you're probably not going to want to do that or do that, right? So you pick a movement that you enjoy, and you have time or in your schedule or certain class that offers that, that's what I would recommend kind of focusing on doing, less than if I'm hitting my exact 150 minutes a week.
Thanks. I also really appreciated you showing how like certain exercises are what we do in our daily activities of living. So thanks for that.
Of course.
Any other questions?
You may have touched this and I didn't hear, but is there a time frame or like, you did talk about, now that I think about the guidelines, it was like 30 minutes or something, but it kind of sounded, and let me know if this is correct, like, but whatever you can do, if you don't have 30 minutes in you, then 10 minutes or 5 minutes or anything is better than nothing.
100%. And what we call that is exercise snacks. So say you don't have time for a full exercise meal, a 30 to 60-minute session at the gym, doing like 3 exercise snacks of 10 minutes during your day is actually extremely beneficial too. it gets you up from sitting and it gets you a little exertion to feel better after those 10 minutes. So my main suggestion is someone who's just getting started, maybe you can't commit to a 36-minute session for your everyday schedule, or again, maybe you don't feel up to that full session. If you set your timer at 3 different time points a day, so maybe you work from home or at a desk and you set your alarm clock on your phone for 10, say 2 and 6 p.m. or something like that as an example. Once that alarm gets up, if you get up and move around for 10 minutes, whether that's walking to go get something, a couple of chairs sit to stand, some calf raises, and that's perfect. So now you've got your 3 alarms have gone off. You've done 10 minutes of movement, and that equates to 30-minute movements a day. So it doesn't have to be at this huge thing. And I think sometimes that's a barrier to think about. Oh, I have to walk or I have to lift weights continuously for this time to get the benefit. You don't, right? It might look the same, or excuse me, different every day. And again, it's just about fitting it into your schedule that works.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right, if there are no more questions, I think we can end this session. Thank you, Emma, for your presentation and answering my questions. And yeah, let us know if you have any more by contacting us. And this will be posted on YouTube, so you can reference this for later.